The series begins with a high school girl named G, who is standing in front of the school she just transferred to. As soon as G enters the school, she notices that all the students there are wealthy. She feels happy about her new school because it looks so luxurious. At that moment, she tells herself that this is a fresh start for her, and that's why she has no intention of causing any trouble at all. Here, we learn that G transferred from her old school because she was a troublemaker. G walks through the school until she reaches the reception desk and asks about the location of Section E, as that is the class she will be studying in. At that moment, G notices a female student looking at her with disgust. That's when she realizes that being in Section E comes with a certain reputation. G is surprised but doesn't dwell on it and heads to the place described by the receptionist. When she arrives, she is shocked to find an old rundown building, completely different from the rest of the school's luxurious structures. However, she doesn't let it bother her and reassures herself that the appearance doesn't matter as long as the inside is decent. But as soon as she steps inside, she is stunned to see how messy and unclean the place is. Still, she continues walking until she finds a group of male students standing around. She asks them if this is Section E, but one of them, named Kiefer, tells her that she's in the wrong place. G explains that the receptionist gave her these directions. However, Kiefer snaps at her and orders her to leave immediately. Feeling annoyed by his attitude, G walks away, thinking to herself that she would love to shove the lollipop he was sucking on down his throat. But she calms herself down and heads to another building that looks clean and well-maintained. There, she enters the classroom and sits at a desk. At that moment, Rocky, the class president, approaches G and introduces herself. G introduces herself as well, mentioning that she is a new student at the school. However, when Rocky looks at G's paperwork, she tells her that she is not registered in this class, but in another class within Section E. Here, G realizes that Kiefer tricked her, so she angrily heads back to Section E. Once there, she discovers that the section has only one classroom, and it's full of boys. Despite this, G doesn't let it bother her and introduces herself to the teacher and students. At that moment, Kiefer, as the class president, stands up to formally welcome her, but instead, he mocks her, making the other boys laugh at her. G doesn't stay quiet. She gets fired up. From that moment on, she begins to face harassment from everyone. No one lets her sit at any desk she approaches, and when she finally manages to sit down, they throw paper balls at her and continue mocking her. Even though she yells at them to stop bothering her, they keep going. Nothing changes until the class ends, and G leaves for the school cafeteria. There, she finds Rocky sitting with a group of girls and joins them. Rocky asks G about her experience in Section E. G hides the truth and claims that everyone there welcomed her warmly. However, the girls seem doubtful because they know that all the students in Section E are troublemakers. At that moment, a student named Iris comments that Section E is a perfect place for G. G gets upset but stays silent and doesn't respond. Instead, she leaves the cafeteria and heads back to Section E. She tries to find a clean spot to eat her lunch, but as soon as she takes out her food, some students snatch it from her. A student named Felix then approaches G and introduces himself. He apologizes for what his classmates did to her and warns her never to take out food in front of them again, because the students in Section E are not allowed to enter the cafeteria or buy food from it. G is shocked, but she takes out more food from her bag. However, Felix quickly snatches it from her, reminding her that he warned her. Then, he walks away. Later, G is back in the classroom when a teacher enters. However, she refuses to teach them because the classroom is filthy and filled with trash. She warns them that if she finds it in the same condition in the next lesson, she won't teach them anymore. At this moment, G gets excited and tries to encourage her classmates to clean the classroom. However, she is shocked when they all walk out and lock the door behind her, leaving her to clean the entire classroom alone. She keeps shouting for them to help her, but no one listens. Instead, they mock her from the classroom window. Left with no choice, G cleans the room by herself, feeling frustrated about what happened. G's first day at school comes to an end, and she returns home. There, we learn that she lives with her uncle's wife. Her aunt asks her about her first day at the new school, but G hides everything that happened and tells her that it was a great day. Her aunt then reminds her of the promise she made and G reassures her that she hasn't forgotten it. She won't cause any trouble with anyone. The next day at school, G is surprised when Kiefer hands her a piece of paper. On it is a list of the types of food he and the other boys in the class like, expecting her to buy them from the school cafeteria. G refuses and tells him that she's not their servant. Kiefer responds by saying that he doesn't want her in the class, and if she wants to stay, she must follow his orders. G gets angry and tells him that she still won't do it. She also adds that from the first moment she saw him, she wanted to punch him. Of course, Kiefer doesn't like that and is about to start a fight with her, but the teacher enters the classroom, cutting their argument short. During lunchtime, a student named Yuri arrives, and all the boys rush toward him because he brings a lot of food with him. However, Yuri looks displeased when he notices G. Felix quickly explains to him that she is a new student in their class. At that moment, Yuri glares at G with anger and then walks away without saying a word. G finds his reaction strange and asks Felix about him. Felix tells her that his name is Yuri and he had been on vacation, visiting his family in Japan. He also tells her that Yuri and Kiefer are close friends. At that moment, Yuri goes to talk to Kiefer about G, saying that he doesn't like having a girl in their section. Kiefer explains that he already tried to scare her off so she would leave, but she didn't back down and even stood up to him. Yuri then suggests that they keep harassing her until she gets fed up and leaves. Kiefer agrees. The next morning, G is having breakfast before heading to school when she runs into Angelo, her older cousin. He asks her how things are going at school, and she assures him that everything is fine. She then asks if he knows anything about Section E, since he used to attend the same school. Angelo tells her that Section E was created specifically for troublemaking students, and that once a student is transferred there, they don't leave until they graduate. He tells her that girls who are transferred to that section have a chance to move to another section, but only if they follow the rules, avoid causing trouble, and get high grades in their subjects. After that, G continues on her way to school when she comes across a boy fighting 4 other guys and managing to beat them all. The moment he sees G, he calls out to her and introduces himself as her classmate from the same section. He then asks if they can walk to school together, and G agrees. As they walk, she learns that his name is C and asks why the school administration banned them from entering the cafeteria. Sai agrees to tell her, but only if she buys him food. G agrees. Sai tells her that some time ago, there was a girl named Ella in their section. He explains that Ella and Kiefer were deeply in love until she got transferred to another section due to her strong connections with the school administration. After that, Kiefer started feeling that Ella was acting differently towards him for no reason. One day, he saw her in the cafeteria kissing another guy. Kiefer got furious, fought the guy, and completely trashed the cafeteria. Since then, the school administration punished Kiefer and all the students in Section E by permanently banning them from the cafeteria. Afterward, C and G arrive at school and go through their day as usual. However, at the end of the last class, G is shocked to find her clothes stuck to the desk. It turns out that Kiefer and Yuri had played a prank on her. The entire class laughs at her before walking out, leaving her behind. G calls out to C and Felix for help, reminding them that she buys them food, and that they can't just abandon her in this situation. Feeling bad for her, C and Felix help pull her off the desk. But in the process, her clothes rip. Sai then takes off his jacket and gives it to her so she can cover herself. At that moment, G is furious. She storms off, searching for Kiefer all over the school. When she finally finds him standing with Yuri and a group of other boys, she walks straight up to him, throws C's jacket in his face, and curses him in front of his friends. She declares that from this moment on, she won't stay silent about anything wrong he does to her. Then, she walks away, leaving him there. Later, G heads home with Sai, who gives her another jacket from his bag to cover her torn clothes. She thanks him for what he did and says goodbye before entering her house. Meanwhile, on his way home, Sai encounters a group of guys. It turns out they are friends of the ones he fought earlier, and they are there to take revenge on him. At that moment, G sits at the dining table to have dinner, and Iris is sitting with them. Here we learn that Iris is G's younger cousin, but it's clear that he's not happy about her presence in their lives. Angelo gets upset when he finds out that Iris doesn't give G a ride to school in his car. He then tells him that, starting the next day, he must take her to school. The next day, Iris follows his brother's orders and drives G to school. When G arrives at her classroom, she finds Kiefer handing her the same paper with the list of food items, along with money to buy food for him and his friends. G yells at him, telling him that she's not obligated to listen to him. However, she also tells him that she will get the food, but only for her classmates, not for him. G then goes to the cafeteria and buys all the food that Kiefer and his friends requested. When she returns with the food, they are all thrilled with what she did. Even Kiefer himself looks pleased. At that moment, Felix calls G over to eat with them. She happily agrees, but Yuri doesn't like what's happening and leaves. After the meal, everyone is back in the classroom. The teacher starts calling out students' names to test their knowledge. As expected, none of the boys answer the questions. However, the entire class is shocked when the teacher calls out G's full name, because her last name is the same as Iris's. Kiefer immediately asks G about her relationship with Iris. She tells them that Iris is her cousin. G is confused by her classmates' reactions, as they all seem visibly angry. She realizes that there must be some kind of issue between them and Iris, but she doesn't know what it is. After class, G tries to talk to her classmates, but they completely ignore her and refuse to speak to her. Meanwhile, Kiefer and Yuri gather all their classmates and start searching for information about G online. They find out the name of her previous school and discover that she was extremely troublesome, causing serious injuries to many boys at her school. At that moment, a classmate informs them that he found information about G's family. Her father has been missing for a long time, and her mother abandoned her, remarried, and started a new life. G lived with her grandmother, but later moved in with her uncle's family after transferring to their school. Yuri and Kiefer then start to suspect that Iris intentionally placed G in their class, so she could spy on them and report back to him. Later, when it's time for classroom cleaning, all the boys leave G to clean the classroom by herself. As usual, Kiefer tries to provoke her by grabbing the trash bins and dumping them onto the floor. G gets angry and frustrated, so she retaliates by throwing stacks of paper onto the ground as well. She refuses to clean unless Kiefer does it with her. Yuri notices that the situation is escalating. Since he knows Kiefer has a short temper and might hit G, he quickly intervenes and convinces Kiefer to help clean up the classroom to avoid any trouble. Kiefer eventually calms down, listens to Yuri, and cleans the room with G. The next day, G is riding in the car with Iris on the way to school when she suddenly spots Sai walking down the street. She asks Iris to stop the car and tells him that she'll go to school with her classmate instead. As they walk together, G asks C why he was absent. He explains that he got into another fight and was seriously injured, so he stayed home to recover. G then tells him how the boys reacted when they learned she was Iris's cousin, and asks if he will treat her the same way. Sai reassures her that he won't, and they continue walking to school. At the end of the school day, C takes G behind the building to attend the class president elections. However, G is shocked to discover that there isn't an election at all. Instead, the process involves a physical fight between the current president, Kiefer, and another boy named David, who has challenged him for the position. The match begins, and Kiefer and David engage in an intense, brutal fight. They relentlessly hit each other with full force, but in the end, Kiefer emerges victorious. The students cheer for him, lift him onto their shoulders, and carry him away in celebration. However, G refuses to leave, and instead goes over to David to help him get home. The next day in class, G gives food to C and David. Yuri and Kiefer sit nearby, watching with disapproval. They don't like what's happening because it's clear that G is getting along well with all the boys in the class. If this continues, the others might start treating her the same way, which would ruin Kiefer and Yuri's plans. They don't want her in their class at all. Just then, one of their classmates enters and informs them that the next period is PE class. He tells them to get ready to head to the gym. Meanwhile, Iris is sitting with his friend when he hears that the students from Class E will also be going to the gym. While they're talking, Ella suddenly enters and greets Iris. It becomes obvious that the two of them are in a relationship. At that moment, Iris decides to go to the gym as well, using the excuse that he wants to check on his cousin G. He claims that if any of the boys bother her, he'll be there to defend her. However, once they arrive, Iris gets unusually close to Ella, making it obvious that he's doing it on purpose to provoke and taunt Kiefer. His plan works. Kiefer reaches his breaking point and, in his anger, decides to punish Iris through G. He forcefully strikes the ball, aiming it directly at G's face. It hits her hard, knocking her to the ground, and her nose starts bleeding. Everyone in the gym is shocked by what just happened. At that moment, Kiefer realizes his mistake and wants to go check on G and apologize, but he hesitates. Before he can move, Iris rushes over to G first to make sure she's okay. Later, G is seen at home, lying on her bed. She had taken 2 days off from school to recover from her injury. Her uncle's wife enters the room with breakfast for her. At that moment, G tells her that she wants to leave the school. She feels like she can't face the students who keep bothering her because she promised that she wouldn't cause any trouble with anyone. Her uncle's wife tells her that she can respond to the harassment she's facing, but without overreacting. Later, G goes out to buy some medicine for herself. While walking, she suddenly finds her classmates in front of her. They try to grab her and force her to go with them, but G manages to escape, only to find herself running straight into Kiefer's arms, who was standing behind her. Kiefer tells her that her classmates were only trying to bring her to him. After that, they sit together at a cafe. G asks Kiefer what he wants from her, but he doesn't respond. Instead, he takes out a medical bandage and gently places it over her injury. When he finishes, he orders her some ice cream. G sarcastically asks him if this is a bribe to keep her quiet about what he did to her. Kiefer replies that he doesn't know how to apologize properly, but he does know that all girls love ice cream. However, G isn't convinced by his way of making amends, so she leaves him and walks away. The next day at school, G goes to the restroom. Shortly after, a group of girls enters behind her. They start gossiping about what happened in the gym. One of them, named Freya, speaks badly about Ella, saying she's not a good girl because she used to date Kiefer, but then left him for Iris. Freya then shifts the conversation to G, questioning why the boys are even paying attention to her when she's not pretty at all. G hears everything they say, but when she hears her name being mentioned, she gets angry. She storms out of the restroom and stands directly in front of Freya without saying a word. Suddenly, she splashes water on her and runs off toward Class E. However, Freya and her friends chase after her and corner her there. At that moment, all the boys from Class E come out to see what's going on. Some of Freya's male friends also arrive, and even Ella and Iris show up, standing back to watch the situation unfold. At that moment, Freya declares that G dared to splash water on her and must be punished for it. However, Iris steps in and tells Freya that G is his cousin. G stands proudly in front of Freya, thinking that Freya won't be able to do anything to her now. But G is completely shocked when Iris continues speaking and says that he won't defend G if she's actually in the wrong. Freya smirks arrogantly and tells G that she will explain the school's student hierarchy to her. She reveals that the school is divided into 5 groups. The first is Group A, which includes herself, Ella, and the rest of the girls standing before G. She also explains that Iris is the leader of this group. Freya then boasts that the students in Group A are the best in the school and are treated like kings and queens by everyone else. Next, she talks about Groups B and C, saying that these students are generally kind and treat everyone around them well. Then, she moves on to Group D, which consists entirely of boys. According to Freya, these boys act as enforcers for Group A, carrying out punishments against anyone who dares to oppose them. Finally, she reaches the last group, Group E, and tells G that she doesn't even need to explain it to her, since G is already a part of it. However, she reminds G that students from Group E are considered the lowest in the school and are completely ignored by everyone. After finishing her explanation, Freya smugly tells G that she's willing to forgive her and won't let anyone from her group punish her, but only on one condition. G must apologize and kiss her shoe. G refuses outright and reveals that Freya insulted both her and Ella. Freya panics, denies it, and blames Mika, who defends herself with Alex's support. Tensions rise as Iris insists on punishing Mika, but Kiefer refuses. A big fight breaks out, and later, Yuri tells Kiefer that their plan to push G out has failed. Instead, she has gained their classmates' sympathy. Later, Yuri sits with Kiefer and tells him that all their plans to push G out of their class have failed. Instead, everything has worked in G's favor, and their classmates have started sympathizing with her and accepting her presence among them. Kiefer responds to Yuri, telling him that he has a plan to kill two birds with one stone. He explains that he will make G fall for him and get emotionally attached, only to break up with her and shatter her heart. That way, he'll get rid of G, while also upsetting Iris for what happened to his cousin. Yuri likes the plan and agrees to it. Shortly after, C comes running to Kiefer, telling him that G is fighting with some students from Group D in the gym. Kiefer rushes there immediately, only to find G on the ground. Without hesitation, he grabs one of the boys and punches him. G and Kiefer then fight back together, defeating their opponents. After the fight, G thanks Kiefer for saving her. At that moment, Z and Yuri enter. Yuri walks up to G and picks her up to take her to the infirmary. He then informs G that the school will be conducting an investigation regarding the fight, and asks her not to mention Kiefer's involvement, as he could face permanent expulsion. G agrees. The next day, it rains heavily, and the school decides to dismiss students earlier than usual. G calls Iris, asking him to pick her up. However, when she steps outside and waits under the rain for him, he never shows up. Yuri sees her standing there and offers her a ride home. Noticing that she is shivering, he gives her his jacket to keep her warm. G is then surprised when Yuri takes her to his house instead of her own, explaining that the road to her house is flooded. He suggests that she stay at his place until the weather improves, and G reluctantly agrees. As soon as she enters Yuri's house, she is shocked by how luxurious it is. Yuri leads her to his room and tells her to change out of her wet clothes, offering her anything from his wardrobe until the maid washes her outfit. He then leaves the room to give her privacy. After some time, Yuri returns, and they sit together chatting. G asks him about his family, and he tells her that his parents live in Japan to manage their business, leaving him to stay in this house with his grandfather. Later, he takes her to the dining area for lunch, where his grandfather is surprised. This is the first time Yuri has ever brought a girl home. As he speaks with G, he quickly grows fond of her, finding her polite and charming. The next day at school, G thanks Yuri and jokes around with him as they walk to class. Kiefer is taken aback when he sees Yuri entering the classroom, laughing and joking with G. Sensing Kiefer's reaction, Yuri approaches him and explains everything that happened the previous day. When he notices Kiefer's irritation, he reassures him, saying that none of this will change their plan. The plan will proceed exactly as they intended. After that, Kiefer and G are summoned to the principal's office, where some students from Class D accuse them of attacking them. G tries to defend herself and Kiefer, but the principal refuses to believe her due to Kiefer's troublemaking history. G is shocked when the principal immediately blames Kiefer, just because of his reputation. She then remembers Yuri's warning about Kiefer being expelled. To protect him, G takes full responsibility for the incident. However, the principal warns her of the consequences of her words, leaving her stunned. Despite her fear, G insists on clearing Kiefer's name, so the principal decides to call her guardian. After they leave the office, Kiefer thanks G for what she did. A little while later, Angelo arrives and takes G aside to talk privately. He scolds her for what she did, reminding her that she promised not to cause any trouble. G apologizes and promises not to make any more trouble. That night, Kiefer is at Yuri's house along with their other male classmates. Kiefer discusses his plan to make G fall for him, and then break her heart so she will eventually leave the class. However, it becomes clear that Yuri disapproves of Kiefer's actions, though he stays silent and doesn't argue. The next day at school, G suddenly hears a noise coming from behind the trash bin. When she approaches, she is surprised to find Mika hiding behind it. Mika is terrified because Iris has ordered the boys from Class D to chase and beat her, believing that she was the one who spoke badly about Ella. That's why she's been running away and hiding from them. Feeling sympathy for Mika, G asks if there's anyone who can help her. Mika replies that the only person who can help is Ella, but unfortunately, Ella is absent today. G then takes Mika to the restroom, helping her wash her face and hands. Afterward, she decides to take Mika to Class E to protect her from the boys who are after her. When Kiefer sees Mika, he gets annoyed by her presence and wants to kick her out of the classroom. However, G scolds him, telling him that Mika needs help and asks him to support her just like he once helped G. Seizing the opportunity to execute his plan and make G fall for him, Kiefer romantically declares that he is willing to do anything for her. G gets flustered and doesn't know how to respond, while Yuri watches from a distance, jealousy evident on his face. At the end of the day, G walks Mika home to protect her in case the boys attack her again. Along the way, G asks Mika about her past with Alex. Mika sits with G and begins to explain, but just then, G spots Alex approaching with C and David following behind. She signals them to stop and not come any closer. Mika then tells G that she and Alex used to love each other, but one day, Ella told her that she saw Alex with another girl. At first, Mika didn't believe Ella, but later, she saw Alex herself getting close to a different girl at a restaurant. Since then, she broke up with him. However, Mika admits that Alex has been trying to apologize and win her back ever since, but she keeps rejecting him. Mika asks G if she thinks Alex deserves a second chance. G looks at Alex and sees regret on his face. She advises Mika to think carefully before making a decision and then walks her home. When G returns home, she talks to Iris and tells him that what he did to Mika was wrong. She insists that Mika wasn't the one who insulted Ella. While they're talking, Ella walks in and gets upset upon learning what Iris did to Mika. Iris quickly follows her, trying to make amends. The next day, Ella approaches G and thanks her for helping Mika. She tells G that she spoke to Iris, and he promised not to bother Mika again. However, Ella then asks G to keep Alex away from Mika, fearing that he will break her heart again. G refuses, saying that it's up to Alex and Mika to decide the fate of their relationship. Shortly after, G is surprised when a student from Class E presents Mika with flowers in front of their classmates and asks her out. G advises Mika to think carefully, but Ella insists that she stay out of it. At that moment, Alex publicly expresses his regret and asks for a chance to talk to Mika. Meanwhile, Kiefer and Yuri both notice how affected G is by the situation. In the end, Mika decides to give Alex a second chance, making the students of Class E cheer in excitement. During Alex and Mika's meeting, G and Kiefer watch them from a distance until they see Alex looking extremely happy because Mika promised to consider getting back together with him. Seizing the moment, Kiefer tells G that he wishes he could share a romantic moment like that with her. G gets flustered, unable to respond, and quickly walks away. And that's the end of the first part of the series. If you want us to make the second part when the rest of the episodes are released, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it.